The Old West is filled with larger-than-life legends, but few were as cunning as Butch Cassidy. While most know him as just another outlaw, Cassidy was the true mastermind behind the Wild Bunch, orchestrating daring train and bank robberies that shocked the frontier. His brilliance kept lawmen guessing and made his gang the most feared of their time. In this video, we'll uncover the side of Butch Cassidy that history often hides. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more untold stories of the Wild West. And drop a comment below to tell us which legendary figure you'd like to see next. Robert Leroy Parker, better remembered by his legendary alias, Butch Cassidy, stands among the most fascinating figures of the American frontier. Known as the guiding mind of the Wild Bunch, he became one of the Old West's most recognizable names. For more than a decade, at the close of the 19th century and into the early 20th, Cassidy planned and carried out daring bank and train robberies. His reputation spread quickly, drawing the attention of lawmen and especially the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, whose pursuit grew relentless. With the net tightening, Cassidy escaped the United States alongside his close partner, Harry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, and Longabaugh's companion at a place. Their journey led them first to Argentina, where they tried to begin anew, and later to Bolivia. It is there in 1908 that history records their trail going cold. Many believe Cassidy and Sundance met their end in a confrontation with Bolivian authorities, though the details remain uncertain and debated. Some legends even suggest they may have survived under assumed identities. Butch Cassidy's story has since been immortalized in film, literature, and popular culture, ensuring that his name continues to capture the imagination. More than just an outlaw, he has become an enduring symbol of the myths and mysteries of the Wild West. Early life. Robert Leroy Parker entered the world on April 13, 1866, in Beaver, Utah Territory. He was the eldest of 13 children, born to English immigrants Maximilian Parker and Anne Campbell Gillies. Both the Parker and Gillies families had embraced the teachings of the Church of Jesus, Christ of Latter-day Saints, while still living in the United Kingdom. Their faith would carry them across the Atlantic and into the American frontier. Maximilian was only 12 years old when his family arrived in Salt Lake City in 1856 as Mormon pioneers. Anne Gillies, raised in Newcastle in northeast England, crossed the ocean with her family 3 years later, in 1859, at just 14. The two eventually married in July of 1865, a year before Robert's birth. Robert spent his youth on the family ranch near Circleville, Utah, where he learned the rigors of frontier life. Restless by nature, he left home as a teenager and soon crossed paths with Mike Cassidy, a well-known cattleman whose influence left a lasting impression. Over the next few years, Robert took jobs on various ranches and even tried his hand at a short apprenticeship with a butcher in Rock Springs, Wyoming Territory. From this trade, he earned the nickname Butch. To complete his new identity, he later adopted the surname Cassidy, a tribute to his early friend and mentor. This transformation marked the beginning of the name the world would come to know. Butch Cassidy, criminal career. Butch Cassidy's first run-in with the law was almost light-hearted by frontier standards. Around 1880, he visited a clothing store in another town, only to find it closed. Rather than go home empty-handed, he slipped inside, took a pair of jeans and a pie, and left behind a handwritten IOU, promising to pay on his next visit. The shopkeeper pressed charges, but a jury later acquitted Cassidy, allowing him to return to ranch work. By 1884, however, he had drifted to Telluride, Colorado, perhaps in search of employment, though some accounts suggest he may have been moving stolen horses to willing buyers. Over the next few years, Cassidy led the life of a working cowboy in Wyoming and Montana territories. In 1887, he returned to Telluride and befriended Matt Warner, a horse owner. Together, they raced Warner's horse at local competitions, splitting the winnings, a partnership that foreshadowed the alliances Cassidy would build later. On June 24, 1889, Cassidy's career escalated when he joined Warner and the McCarty brothers in robbing the San Miguel Valley Bank in Telluride. The group took about $21,000, worth roughly $800,000 today, and retreated to the remote Robber's Roost in southeastern Utah, a rugged hideout that soon became legendary. By 1890, Cassidy tried his hand at respectability, purchasing a ranch near Dubois, Wyoming. Yet the ranch sat uncomfortably close to the notorious Hole in the Wall, a hideout for outlaw gangs. His brand, the Reverse E, Box E, was distinctive, but his ranching never proved profitable, raising questions about whether it served as a front for hidden dealings with outlaws. In the early 1890s, Cassidy also became personally connected to the Bassett family, well-known ranchers in Browns Park. He formed a relationship with Ann Bassett, whose father supplied him with horses and beef. Later, he briefly became involved with Ann's older sister Josie, before returning to Ann. In 1894, Cassidy's fortune turned. He was arrested in Lander, Wyoming, accused of horse theft and possibly of operating a local protection scheme. Sentenced to 2 years at the Wyoming State Prison in Laramie, he served 18 months before being released and pardoned in January 1896 by Governor William Alfred Richards. This mix of charm, ambition, and questionable choices was already shaping Cassidy into more than just another cowboy. He was on his way to becoming the mastermind of the Wild Bunch. Formation of the Wild Bunch. After his release from prison in 1896, Butch Cassidy reconnected with a wide circle of frontier figures. Among them were his closest friend William Ellsworth (Elzie) Lay, as well as Harvey Kid Curry Logan, Ben the Tall Texan Kilpatrick, Harry Tracy, Will News Carver, Laura Bullion, and George Flatnose Curry. Together they became known as the Wild Bunch, a name that echoed the earlier Doolin Dalton gang, also called by the same title. The Wild Bunch wasted little time making their presence known. On August 13, 1896, Cassidy, Lay, Logan, and Bob Meeks robbed the bank at Montpelier, Idaho, taking around $7,000. Soon after, Cassidy invited Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, to join their ranks. By early 1897, Cassidy, Lay, and Bassett and Lay's companion Maud Davis were hiding out at the rugged Robber's Roost in Utah. In April, the women were sent home while the men prepared their next move. On April 22, 1897, Cassidy and Lay organized an ambush in Castle Gate, Utah, targeting payroll money for the Pleasant Valley Coal Company. They carried off a heavy sack of silver coins before retreating once again to Robber's Roost. The gang's reputation spread even further on June 2, 1899, when they intercepted the Union Pacific Overland Flyer near Wilcox, Wyoming. This single act brought them nationwide notoriety and triggered an intense manhunt. Though lawmen from several jurisdictions joined the pursuit, the Wild Bunch managed to elude capture. The chase only grew more complicated when personal connections became involved. Notably, Pinkerton detective Charlie Siringo attempted to infiltrate their world by befriending Elfie Landusky, who was tied to the Logan family. His goal was to reach the gang through her and tighten the net around them. Meanwhile, in July 1899, Elzie Lay and others participated in a Colorado and Southern Railroad heist near Folsom, New Mexico. Historians believe Cassidy himself may have planned or directed the operation. Lay was eventually arrested and received a life sentence in the New Mexico State Penitentiary. Despite these setbacks, the Wild Bunch developed a method that kept them one step ahead. After each robbery, they would scatter in different directions, later reuniting at well-known hideouts such as the Hole in the Wall, Robber's Roost, or even Fanny Porter's brothel in San Antonio, places that offered both refuge and anonymity. The Wild Bunch's blend of daring schemes, strategic alliances, and elusive movements cemented their place as one of the most talked about groups of the American West. Amnesty Petition of 1899. In the late 1890s, Butch Cassidy attempted an unusual move for an outlaw. He sought amnesty. He approached Utah Governor Heber Wells, hoping to negotiate a pardon. Wells advised him to first settle matters with the Union Pacific Railroad, which had been one of his frequent targets. Railroad Chairman E. H. Harriman even tried to open talks with Cassidy through mutual contacts such as Matt Warner. That opportunity quickly vanished. On August 29, 1900, Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and others robbed a Union Pacific train number. 3 near Tipton, Wyoming. The incident broke Cassidy's earlier promise to Wyoming's governor and effectively ended any chance of a deal for Amnesty. Meanwhile, members of the Wild Bunch were facing growing pressure. On February 28, 1900, lawmen attempted to capture Lonnie Logan at his aunt's home. The attempt ended with Lonnie losing his life, while his cousin, Bob Lee, was taken into custody for cattle theft. A month later, on March 28th, George Curry and News Carver were pursued near St. John's, Arizona, after passing stolen currency from the Wilcox train robbery. The chase ended with a violent exchange, leaving 2 deputies dead, while Curry and Carver slipped away. Just weeks later, on April 17th, George Curry himself was killed during another pursuit in Grand County, Utah. The chain of losses continued. In May 1900, Kid Curry retaliated against those responsible for George and Lonnie's deaths, taking the lives of Sheriff John Tyler and Deputy Sam Jenkins in Moab. The escalating cycle of revenge only deepened the Wild Bunch's notoriety. That December, Cassidy posed with Sundance Kid, Logan, Carver, and Ben Kilpatrick for the now famous Fort Worth 5 photograph. When the Pinkerton Detective Agency acquired a copy, it became the basis for wanted posters that circulated across the country. The Wild Bunch struck again on July 3, 1901, when Kid Curry and others robbed a Great Northern Railway train near Wagner, Montana. Their haul, over $60,000, equal to about $2.27 million today, was one of the most lucrative robberies of the Old West. The gang dispersed soon after, but lawmen closed in. News Carver was killed during a pursuit, while Kilpatrick was arrested in St. Louis later that year. His capture led authorities to Laura Bullion, who was found with a portion of the stolen banknotes. Kid Curry remained the most elusive. In December 1901, he was involved in the deaths of 2 Knoxville policemen before escaping capture. Later, he resurfaced in Montana, where he tracked down James Winters, the man he believed responsible for killing his brother years earlier. Escape to South America. By the early 1900s, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were running out of room to breathe. Pursued by law enforcement on multiple fronts and watching their once powerful gang unravel, they decided to vanish. On February 20th, 1901, the pair, joined by Sundance's companion Etta Place, boarded the British steamer Herminius in New York City and sailed for Buenos Aires, Argentina. Cassidy traveled under the alias James Ryan, posing as Place's brother. In Patagonia, they sought a quieter life. The trio purchased a 15,000-acre ranch along the Rio Blanco near Cholila, in the shadow of the Andes. Their home was a 4-room log cabin, and by 1902, Cassidy could write proudly of our little family of 3, describing a herd of 300 cattle, 1,500 sheep, and 28 horses. That letter, preserved today by the Utah State Historical Society, shows a man seemingly trying to build an honest life. But trouble had a way of finding them. In February 1905, 2 English-speaking bandits robbed a bank in Rio Gallegos, far to the south near the Strait of Magellan. Soon after, Cassidy and Sundance quietly sold their Kalila ranch, suspecting that the law had discovered their whereabouts. The Pinkertons already knew their location, but harsh Patagonian winters kept their agents at bay. Even as Governor Julio Lezana issued an arrest warrant, the group received a warning from Sheriff Edward Humphreys, a Welsh-Argentine official friendly with Cassidy and fond of Etta Place. Once again, the trio slipped away, this time north to San Carlos de Bariloche, where they crossed Lake Nahuel Huapi aboard the steamer Condor. By December 19, 1905, Cassidy, Sundance, Place, and an unidentified companion struck again, this time robbing the Banco de la Nación Argentina in Villa Mercedes, taking 12,000 pesos before retreating across the Andes into Chile. The life of fugitives weighed heavily on Etta. By June 1906, she had had enough of the constant flight. Sundance took her back to San Francisco, leaving Cassidy once again with his closest friend. Seeking stability, Cassidy adopted the alias James Santiago Maxwell and found legitimate employment at the Concordia tin mine in the Bolivian Andes. Sundance soon joined him, and the two took on payroll guarding duties for the company. Even so, they continued to move. By late 1907, they were in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, still chasing the dream of one day settling permanently as respectable ranchers, an ambition that always seemed just out of reach. Death. On November 3rd, 1908, a payroll courier for the Aramayo Franca and Saya silver mine was waylaid near the small Bolivian town of San Vicente. Reports soon circulated that the culprits were two masked Americans, believed by many to be Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. 3 days later, witnesses claimed to have seen the pair arrive in San Vicente, where they stayed at a boarding house owned by Bonifacio Casasola. Their presence drew suspicion when locals noticed they possessed a mule marked with the Aramayo Company brand. Casasola reported his concerns to a telegraph operator, who in turn alerted nearby soldiers from the Abaroa Cavalry Regiment. On the night of November 6th, a combined group of soldiers, police, and town officials surrounded the small boarding house. Their goal was to arrest the suspected payroll robbers. What followed was a tense exchange that stretched through the evening and into the night. By 2 a.m., witnesses outside heard cries from inside the house, followed by 2 gunshots. When authorities entered the next morning, they discovered 2 lifeless men. One appeared to have been struck in the forehead, the other at the temple. The police speculated that the men were Cassidy and Longabaugh, though they could not prove it with certainty. The bodies were laid to rest in the San Vicente Cemetery, near the grave of a German miner, Gustav Zimmer. Yet questions lingered. No one could confirm the true identities of the dead, and the mystery surrounding their fate only deepened. Decades later, in 1991, forensic anthropologist Clyde Snow led a team to search for the graves. They uncovered remains but no DNA evidence linking them to Cassidy or Sundance's descendants. Snow's investigation became the basis for the British documentary Wanted. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1993, later aired on Nova. The search did not end there. In 2017, another effort focused on a site near Good Springs, Nevada, believed by some to be Cassidy's final resting place. Remains were found, but once again, the DNA results failed to provide any confirmation. More than a century later, the story remains unresolved. Did Cassidy and Sundance truly die in Bolivia, or did they slip away into anonymity? The legend lives on, fueled by uncertainty, and that may be why their names endure. Rumors of survival. The mystery of Butch Cassidy's final years has fueled debate for generations. While many believe he died in Bolivia in 1908, countless stories suggest he may have quietly returned to the United States. In the 1930s, geologist David Love heard a remarkable tale from Dr. Francis Smith. Smith claimed he had once encountered Cassidy, who explained that he had undergone facial surgery in Paris to change his appearance. To prove his identity, he showed Smith an old wound that the doctor recognized as his own work. Decades later, in 1960, Josie Bassett insisted that Cassidy had visited her in the 1920s after leaving South America, and that he eventually passed away in Johnny, Nevada, roughly 15 years before her statement. Others from Cassidy's hometown of Circleville, Utah, echoed similar claims, recalling that he had lived and worked in Nevada until his death. Western historian Charles Kelly, writing in The Outlaw Trail, 1938, found it odd that Cassidy never visited his father in Circleville if he had indeed survived. Yet Cassidy's great-nephew Bill Bettinson argued otherwise, saying that Cassidy did return many times to see his family. Even Cassidy's own sister, Lulu Parker Bettinson, told writer Bruce Chatwin in Patagonia that she had no doubt her brother came home. She recalled him sharing blueberry pie with the family in 1925, and she believed he later died of pneumonia in Washington in the late 1930s. Local legends stretch beyond Utah. Residents of Baggs, Wyoming, told researchers for the 1978 television series In Search of that Cassidy had stopped in town in 1924, driving a Ford Model T. Lulu herself remembered him picking up his brother Mark, then arriving at their father's home where he was introduced simply as your brother Robert Leroy. According to her, Cassidy expressed deep regret, admitting, All I did is make a wreck of my life. Beatonson later claimed Cassidy lived out his days in the Pacific Northwest before dying in 1937, and that the family deliberately kept his final resting place a secret. They chased him all his life, and now he's going to rest in peace. This account was later detailed in her 1975 book, Butch Cassidy, My Brother, and expanded upon by author W.C. Jameson in Butch Cassidy, Beyond the Grave. The mystery resurfaced in 2019 on the television series Mission Declassified. Journalist Christoph Putzel met researcher Marilyn Grace at Cassidy's childhood log cabin in Circleville. Grace explained a local belief that Cassidy had been buried nearby at a secluded spot known as Tom's Cabin, where he and his brothers had camped as boys. According to Grace, neighbor Dee Crosby claimed to have seen a secret burial take place there on July 20th, 1937. Another neighbor, Alta Orton, remembered the Parker family wearing black clothing on the same day. Years later, cadaver dogs gave positive indications at the site, and excavations uncovered two bones, a spinal fragment and a toe, later confirmed as human, though lacking sufficient DNA for a conclusive match. It is said the Parker family may have later moved Cassidy's remains from the cabin site, leaving those fragments behind. If true, this would fit the family's long-standing desire to protect his final resting place from public scrutiny. Butch Cassidy was far more than just another outlaw on the run. He was the calculating mind behind the Wild Bunch, a man who blurred the line between myth and reality. His story continues to spark debates, inspire books and films, and leave us wondering just how much of his life was truth and how much was legend. If you enjoyed uncovering this side of Butch Cassidy, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more hidden stories from the Old West. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know which outlaw, lawman, or forgotten figure you'd like to see featured next.